Thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you to Maria and to Senator Wendy as chairs of our Friends of Parliament for Heart and Stroke Foundation. Thank you for hosting us here. And a special thanks to Sir Peter and Lady Cosgrove for making the time to come and talk to you all today. We're honoured to have you as our patrons. Stroke Foundation respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout Australia and acknowledges their continuing connection to land, water, sky and community. We pay our respects to the peoples, cultures and elders past, present, for they hold the memories, culture and hopes of their people. I acknowledge that we are meeting on the land of the Ngunnawal people. I'm here today with my wonderful team, and we also have some really special people with us today, our survivors of stroke. So we've got Gus and Sophie and Gretel. So if you have some time, please do talk to them. They are the face of stroke in 2023. Amazing statistics. 24% of strokes happen to those under 54 years of age. That is too many. So if you take some time to speak to them, they can tell you what it's like living with stroke as a young person in Australia today. Later on, I'll be able to introduce you to two of the greats from the stroke community, Professor Steve Davis and Jeff Donnan, and they'll talk to you a bit more about the Australian Stroke Alliance. Alright, the glass is going to. It is always such a privilege to be here in your house. The decisions made here, particularly decisions about health and disability, absolutely change the lives of millions of Australians. Of course, there's never enough funding to go around, and in stroke we really feel that. Despite being 80% preventable, stroke kills more Australian women than breast cancer and more Australian men than prostate cancer. Stroke Foundation's work is approximately 75% funded by donations. So that's by survivors of strokes themselves, their families and their networks. That isn't good enough. But because of their generosity, we are able to fill gaps in the health sector. That means that we can run a national stroke line phone support service, which last year answered over 2,600 calls. And they're not short calls, these are really complicated calls, they take a lot of time, and actually we found they're increasing in complexity. The donation also allows us to distribute our Stroke Journey source of a suite of resources, and this is the real pack you take home when you get discharged from hospital. And last year we shared that with over 25,000 stroke survivors across 163 hospitals. Public donations also mean we're able to continue our Stroke Safe talks, which is all around raising awareness of stroke and prevention of stroke. So we delivered almost 400 prevention talks to over 12,000 Australians just in 1 year last year. We are really proud of what we've achieved, but there is so much more we can do. That is why we come to you each year ahead of the budget asking for support. And we're so grateful for the engagement we've had with Minister Butler and Sister Minister Jed Kearney to date. And we appreciate the real depth of understanding and the questions that you come and ask us about our programs. Our requests are simple. A one-off funding for a national advertising campaign to educate everybody about the FAST message, and financial backing to help us roll out our new Navigator programme. This programme will mean we can work directly with hospital discharge teams to make sure that no survivor falls into the gaps when they get discharged from hospital. We see immense value in partnering with governments to support all Australians. We are a national charity and we do have really excellent reach, but we cannot tackle this alone. Stroke costs the country $6 billion a year. Prevention and better support to reduce secondary strokes will bring that cost right down. We know we are heard, but we also know we're just one of the many causes looking for your support. So we will be tenacious in advocating for funding for our Stroke Foundation services. Stroke Foundation requests currently cover stroke prevention and recovery. Perfect timing by the gentleman here. We acknowledge that there is the treatment in our stroke continuum. All Australians, regardless of where they live, deserve equitable access to the very best treatment when stroke strikes. We are therefore very grateful to have the two pioneers of stroke treatment in our midst, and I'd like to invite Professor Steve Davis and Jeff Gollan to the stage. By your time, His Excellence, fellas.
Perfect time. Perfect time.
Thanks so much, Liz. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Steve Davis, co-chair with my colleague and friend Jeff Donnan of the Australian Stroke Alliance. We would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we're meeting, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. Pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and any Aboriginal or Torres Islander people here today. And I'd like to pay a special acknowledgement. Where is Angela? Angela, way down the other end. Angie Dos Santos is the first, and she reminded us, only Aboriginal neurologist in Australia. We're very proud to be working with Angela. We have had a vision that the gap in Australia for modern stroke therapy, which has been transformed in the last decade or so, that the gap between rural and urban Australia needs to be bridged. And you're probably aware that rural Australia is 1/3 of the country, and they're grossly disadvantaged. They can't access the big wins in stroke therapy that have occurred, which is clot-busting treatment to dissolve the blood clots, block the supply of oxygen to the brain, and thrombectomy, where the blood clots are literally pulled out of the brain. We think that a major part of the solution and strategy is to move the hospital to the patient, not to wait till the patient gets to hospital. We've proven that works in Melbourne with our mobile stroke unit, the first in Australia and one of only two in the Southern Hemisphere at present. We were funded with a $40 million Frontiers grant by the MRFF to undertake the program. And the biggest barrier to getting the hospital to the patient in rural and remote Australia is that the current scanner that we use in our stroke ambulance is half a tonne. So we're working with two innovative Australian companies, EM Vision in Queensland and MicroX in Adelaide, to develop ultra-lightweight brain imaging that's portable and affordable, that weighs 1/10 of the current scanners and can be fitted into regular ambulances that we've called stroke smart ambulances and into aircraft. Very lightweight and portable, deliver and treat the patient at their home, outside their home. And here are some examples here. That's the EM Vision. And we've got a mock-up, down the other end, a very different device. So I won't speak at any length about these, but that's the MicroX mini CT scanner, 1/10 of the weight, incredibly exciting developments. And this is the electromagnetic vision prototype, where microwave radiation, like the mobile phone, takes images of the brain. This is all linked up by a digital platform called Zeus, which relies on the internet across Australia, and Starlink, the Elon Musk company now has full coverage, apparently, of Australia. It needs to be linked with education and economic evaluation. So we're progressing very well. We're halfway through our grant. We're about to move into clinical trials with these devices, which are being further advanced. Australia is really leading the world in this ultra-lightweight, miniaturised area. But we don't want to fall off a cliff at the end of the program. We want to implement this. We want to try and help bridge this gap with rural and remote Australia. That's our mission, that's our vision. And I'm going to get Angie just to come up and have a few words first about the challenge Indigenous Australia and how we've embedded our colleagues in this program.
Thanks Steve. I'd also just like to pay my respects to the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people whose land we stand on today, and also to any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. I think the most important points for me to make, standing between these two, I never really have as much to say as they do, but I think the most important thing to say is that the population of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that are affected by this lack of healthcare equity is much greater than non-Aboriginal people. So up to 20% of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters live in rural, remote Australia. They also, unfortunately, have a higher incidence of stroke. On average, nationally, it's 3 times higher, the incidence rate. But if you're under the age of 55 as an Aboriginal person, your incidence is actually 9 times greater. So not only are they younger, up to 10 to 12, and in some jurisdictions of Australia, they're 19 years younger at the onset of their stroke, but they're also 9 times more likely to have a stroke. So being able to bring the hospital to the patient, as some of you may know, there's apprehension for an Aboriginal person to attend an emergency department for various reasons, but being able to bring the treatment to the patient enables, I think, on-country care, which is really important, as you would know, to a lot of Aboriginal people. Within the Australian Stroke Alliance, I'm part of a group that is been since inception. So one of the key parts of the Australian Stroke Alliance, MRFF, was the inception of an Indigenous-led voice, which I'll term that word because it seems pretty key at the moment, to the rest, so all of our 40 key partners, to be able to bring Indigenous voice, be able to bring Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous perspectives, and embed Indigenous governance into the research program, which has really transformed the way that we're then able to work with Indigenous communities. We're doing that nationally, and we've seen Steve May mentioned the Alice Springs Summit, which has truly changed the way that Alice Springs Hospital themselves have approached stroke care. And again, that's from listening to the people on the ground and being able to then transform our research program to suit those individual communities, as opposed to just that top-down approach that doesn't seem to work.
Thanks, Virginia. And I'd just like to, before bringing Jeff up here, mention Dr. Henry Daparua, sitting down there, who's our CEO of Australian Stroke Alliance, Dr. Damien Easton, who's our Chief Advisory Officer, Strategic Advisory Officer, and Amanda placed in charge of our communications. But I'm now going to throw to the co-chair, Professor Jeff Don.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks for taking the time this incredibly busy week, I know, and thanks for your support, particularly to Sir Peter Cosgrove, who I know as a patron of the Stroke Foundation has just been a champion. I remember when we first spoke about this, you said, what a great idea, and we think it is as well. We really feel that this is going to transform how we manage patients with stroke across Australia, and particularly in rural remote, and as Andrew was saying, for Indigenous people. So where we're up to is, as Steve said, we're nearly halfway. So we have to take stock and say, where are we going from here? Well, first of all, to report that for both of our wonderful companies here today, Microx and Envision, they're completely on target. So it looks likely that at the end of this grant, in about 2.5 years' time or so, we will have 2 devices that are going to transform the management of stroke patients, particularly in rural remote Australia. So we have to think ahead. We don't want to, as Steve was saying, drop off a cliff and saying, what a surprise, we're ready, and what do we do now? We've got to start planning now. And in that vein, we've already put in place a very strong educational program, because you can't suddenly say to people, here's this new device, they've never seen one in their lives, how are we going to use it, what sort of workflows are there? So we've been educating healthcare professionals at every level as to what this means, and also socialising it with state as well as federal governments, of course. So that is going very strongly and will continue throughout the whole program. The devices themselves will be ready to start clinical trial at the end of this year, start of next year, so that at the end of the program in 2026, we should have them completely validated and ready to roll out. Of course, at the same time, we have to look at the pennies, the cents, the dollars. We have to understand what this means economically. So we have embedded in the program a health economic evaluation. And this is both by Monash University as an academic embedment, and secondly as an external professional commercial assessment by the SPP company. We worked with the SPP company during our grant process, and they estimated if you go out to 2050, in direct commercial gains, there will be about $15 billion, which is not to be sneezed at. About a third of that would be workforce productivity improvements, about a third would be healthcare system improvements, and about a third would be direct commercial impact. And I'm sure our company people here today will love that. It serves both purposes. But if you also look at the health and social benefits, they estimate that could be up to $50 billion. So it's quite a significant impact that we think this program is going to have. So now, as I was saying, we have to say where to now. So we have to think about implementation. So we're here in Canberra talking to a number of key people to say, get their advice to say, how do you think we should handle this? Because the federal government naturally has a strong investment already as the largest research grant ever awarded in this country to make sure that we don't waste that money and we're just not spinning our wheels. So they've already, we've had our first meeting this morning, and we've got another one this afternoon to advise us how to coordinate with the states and all stakeholders to make sure that this implementation goes absolutely seamlessly. And our first advice is very helpful, and we're looking forward to further advice this afternoon. We'll continue to work with them to make sure, as I was saying, it's a very smooth and productive transition. So thank you again for coming along, and I'll hand back to my colleague Lisa Murphy, CEO of the Stroke Foundation. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Angela. So thank you all for your time. I know you're really busy, so I'll let you go off. But just a reminder, Stroke Foundation's budget submission will be coming to your inboxes. This is a separate ask to the Alliance. This is all about preventing stroke, getting the fast message out, ties in very nicely here, but also about recovery, about picking those people up that fall off the cliff, just because of strains on the health system. So thank you so much. Enjoy lunch, have a chat to our gang here, and thank you so much for your time.